Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're stepping way beyond the fairy tales and the highly sanitized myths you see in pop culture. We're going to explore the profound, living psychological framework of the Viking Age people. You see, this wasn't just some collection of fun stories about gods hitting things with hammers. No, this was a rigorous, deeply fatalistic worldview that literally shaped how an entire civilization lived, fought, and died. It's a question that really demands we strip away centuries of reimagining. Beyond the superhero blockbusters, beyond the grand operas, what did the Vikings actually believe? What drove them to cross those unforgiving oceans in the first place? And what gave them the incredible resilience to face such a harsh, unpredictable world? If you look at the Norse gods in modern media, they're often molded into these familiar, almost comforting archetypes, right? But the mythological reality is strikingly different, and honestly, it's so much more fascinating. Instead of a purely noble patriarch, the historical Odin was actually a figure clinging ruthlessly to his waning authority. He was out there cutting dodgy deals and sacrificing literal parts of himself for forbidden knowledge. And Thor, the indomitable defender of humanity, was also caught up in stories filled with wild humor and trickery. I mean, there's a famous myth where he's literally forced to cross-dress as a reluctant bride just to steal back his hammer. These gods were complex, they were deeply flawed, and they were profoundly non-moralistic. Okay, let's dive into this. We're going to cover 5 main areas today: cosmology and the pantheon, core myths, fate and ethos, Ragnarok, and finally, rituals and reality. Starting us off with part 1, cosmology and the pantheon. Now, what's really interesting about this macro view of the Norse universe is how it was structured. This entire cosmos was held together by Yggdrasil, the great world tree. It wasn't just a simple binary of heaven and hell like you might expect. You had Asgard, the fortress of the Aesir gods, and Midgard, the realm of humans. But absolutely crucial to this entire structure was the constant looming tension between opposing forces: the primordial fire of Muspelheim on one side and the bitter ice of Niflheim on the other. And constantly threatening the borders of order was Jotunheim, the chaotic realm of the giants. Navigating this wild cosmos were the primary deities. Odin, the All-Father, relentlessly pursued wisdom. He went as far as sacrificing his own eye at Mimir's well and hanging himself on Yggdrasil just to grasp the secrets of the runes. Then you have Thor, the great protector, wielding his hammer Mjolnir to smash the chaotic Jotnar and defend humanity. We've also got the Vanir deities, Freya and Freyr, who brought the vital, necessary forces of fertility, wealth, and agriculture into the pantheon. And then there's Loki. Now, Loki wasn't the Christian devil. He was a shape-shifting trickster, a totally ambiguous figure who was neither purely evil nor good. He was essentially the narrative engine of the myths, constantly plunging the gods into terrible peril and then cunningly saving them at the last second. Moving right along to part 2, core myths and legends. To truly understand these gods, we have to look to the literary tradition of the Eddas. This is where we see exactly how these figures operated in their cyclical, incredibly violent world. The Norse creation myth is just visceral. In the primordial void called Ginnungagap, fire and ice collided to create the first entity, a massive giant named Ymir. But existence didn't just passively appear out of nowhere. The gods Odin, Vili, and Ve basically slaughtered Ymir. From his destroyed corpse, they fashioned the world. His flesh literally became the earth, his blood the oceans, his skull the sky. Even the first humans, Ask and Embla, they were carved from lifeless driftwood. It establishes this fundamental, inescapable Norse theme: creation emerges exclusively from destruction. And that brings us to the tragedy that sets the end of the world in motion: the death of Baldur. Baldur was the most beloved of the gods, and he seemed completely untouchable. But Loki, taking his darkest turn yet, manipulated the blind god Hother into shooting Baldur with literally the only thing in existence that could harm him: a tiny dart made of mistletoe. This wasn't just a murder, it was the shattering of the cosmic order. Baldur's death is the tragic turning point that proves to everyone that no one, not even the brightest and best of the gods, is safe. Let's move to part 3 and see how this builds into their ethos, worldview, and moral teachings. Shifting from those grand cosmic myths down to daily human existence, at the absolute center of the Norse mindset were the concepts of Weird and Orlog, fate and destiny. This was a profoundly fatalistic cosmos. Fate was a web woven before you were even born, and it was entirely inescapable. Think about it. Not even Odin, with all his desperate hoarding of knowledge and powerful magic, could escape his prophesied death. The gods fully knew they were doomed to fall, yet they actively chose to fight anyway. Because the future was so fixed and honestly quite grim, the moral teachings of the Norse were highly pragmatic. The Havamal, or the Sayings of the High One, which is attributed to Odin himself, doesn't offer a path to spiritual salvation. Instead, it offers a gritty survival guide for a harsh world. It teaches hospitality, a healthy dose of skepticism, self-reliance, and above all else, honor. Take a look at this powerful excerpt right here from the Havamal. Cattle die and kinsmen die. Thyself too soon must die. But one thing never, I ween, will die. Fair fame of one who has earned. It brilliantly encapsulates their total preoccupation with the impermanence of life. Your life is going to end, your wealth is going to rot away, but your deeds, your reputation, that will echo in eternity. It's absolutely vital to contrast this with Abrahamic traditions. You see, the Norse gods didn't demand transactional worship in exchange for the cleansing of your sins. They weren't saviors, they were allies in a doomed world. Norse paganism demanded respect, mutual alliance, and standing honorably shoulder to shoulder against the encroaching chaos of the giants. Which perfectly sets up part 4, Apocalypse, better known as Ragnarok. And this brilliantly illustrates how that encroaching chaos inevitably leads to Ragnarok, the prophetic twilight of the gods. It's the grand culmination of their entire fatalistic worldview. The sequence of the apocalypse kicks off with Fimbulwinter, 3 unbroken years of brutal, freezing winter where all social morality just collapses. Then, the chains holding back chaos snap. Loki, the great wolf Fenrir, and the Midgard serpent all break free. The final battles are marked by sheer mutual destruction. Odin gets swallowed by Fenrir, Thor slays the serpent but drops dead from its venom. Loki and Heimdall kill each other. The whole world sinks into the boiling sea. But remember that core theme? Destruction breeds creation. The earth rises again, green and renewed, repopulated by a few surviving gods, and 2 humans, Lif and Lifthrasir. And the cycle continues. Finally, part 5, cultural practices and real-world beliefs. So how did this epic, bloody, and beautiful mythology actually translate into the physical dirt of history? How did Norse pagans actually live and bleed for this faith? Well, their rituals were visceral and deeply rooted in the landscape. They practiced blot. These were sacrificial rituals involving animals and occasionally even humans to bless the land or their military campaigns, which were then followed by massive communal feasts. They didn't really build grand stone temples. Instead, they worshipped in sacred groves or the longhouses of chieftains. And the mythology permeated everyday habits too. Check this out. The historian Snorri Sturluson noted a chilling warning that the dead should always have their fingernails cut. Why? Because those uncut nails would be collected by the giants to build Naglfar, the terrifying ship of the apocalypse that would sail at Ragnarok. Their death rituals were highly theatrical events, specifically designed to link the community's beliefs right into the earth. Funerals utilized massive cremation pyres built to create huge, billowing pillars of smoke to carry the deceased upward to the afterlife. The elite members of society might receive incredibly elaborate ship burials, packed to the brim with goods, sacrificed animals, and sometimes even sacrificed servants. All of this was to ensure they arrived in Valhalla, or Freya's Hall, with the exact same honor and status they held in life. So the crucial point I want to leave you with is this. Despite its heavy fatalism, the Norse worldview was not one of despair, not at all. It was a call to profound courage. If every ending in Norse myth merely fertilizes the ground for a new beginning, what can their ancient pragmatism teach us today? When we look at their deep acceptance of fate, their intense prioritization of lasting deeds over fleeting wealth, and their understanding that destruction is really just the preamble to creation, we are left to wonder how we might face our own inevitable cycles of destruction and rebirth. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer.